Chapter 29. Those twain will seek the wisdom of the woodwife. Again next day was their life such as it had been the day before. And as they lay in cool shadow of a great oak, Birdalone fell to telling Arthur all the whole story of her dealings with the woodwife, and how that she had so loved her and holpen her. That through her love and her help she had escaped the witch and her snares, who would have turned her into a half-devil for the undoing of manfolk. And how that the said woodwife had never appeared to her but as an image and double of herself, save on the time when she played the leech to him. Then she told him how all had gone when the woodwife had sought him out for the fulfillment of their love, and of the dreadful day when they had come upon him out of his wit and but little manlike. Then she asked, would he, within the next day or two, that they should go see the woodwife together and thank her for her help, and bring him within the ring of her love and guarding, and he yes said it with a good will. After this she would have him tell her of how things had gone with him since that evil day when he had come home from the castle of the quest and found her gone. So he told her somewhat, and of his dole and misery, and his dealings with the foemen of Greenford, but yet scantly, and as one compelled. And at last he said, Dear love, since thou art cassetting me with all solace of caresses, I pray thee remember my trouble and grief, how sore they were, and do with me as with a sick man getting well, as I wot surely thou wouldest do. And do thou that which is at this present the softest and merriest to me, and that forsooth is, that thou shouldest talk and tell, and I should hearken the sweetness of the music. And only here and there put in a word to rest thee and make thy tale the sweeter. She laughed with love on him, and without more ado fell to telling everything she might think of, concerning her days in the house of captivity, both when she was but a bairn, and when she was grown to be a young woman. And long was she about the tale, nor was it all done in one day, and a multitude of things she told him which are not set down in this book. In the evening when they were going again to and fro the meads, it was other talk they fell on, to wit, of their fellows of the quest, both of Sir Hugh and the three lovely ladies, and now was Arthur not but kind when he spake of Atra. Nor spake Birdalone otherwise. But she said, I shall now say a hard word, yet must thou bear it, my loveling, since we twain are now become one, and have but one joy together and one sorrow. Deemest thou that Atra is yet alive? Sooth it is, said Arthur, it may well be that I have slain her. And what may we do by her if ever we fall in with her alive? Said Birdalone. I wot not, said Arthur, some would say that we have done penance for our fault, both thou and I. And what other penance may we do, save sundering from each other? And by God above I will not. By thine head and thine hands I will not, said Birdalone. So said they. But therewith their eyes told tales of the fair Eve and the lovely meadows, and the house, the shrine of the dear white bed no less sweet to them than erst. But then presently Birdalone stayed her love, and took her arms about him, and each felt the sweetness of the other's body, and joy blossomed anew in their hearts. Then fell Arthur to telling of the deeds and the kindness of Bodwen, whom never again they should see on the earth. And they turned back home to the house, and on the way spake Birdalone, This is what I would we should do, whereas I have sought thee and thou me, and we have found each other. Whereas ye sought me when I went astray in the black valley of the Greyweathers, and before, when ye three sought your own loves, now I would that we should seek our fellows and have joy in them, and thole sorrow with them as in days gone by. Spake Arthur, Dear is the rest with thee in this wilderness, yet were it a deed of fame, and would bring about a day of joy, might we find our friends again, and knit up the links of the fellowship once more. But thou the wise and valiant, belike thou hast in thine head some device whereby this might be set about. Birdalone said, Simple is my device, to wit, that we ask one who is wiser than I. Let us tarry not, but go tomorrow and see the woodwife and talk with her concerning it. Then she smiled upon him and said, But when thou sayest her, wilt thou be aghast if she come before us in my shape of what I was 5 years agone, or 6? Nay, nay, he said, thou art not so terrible as that, not very far do I run from thee now. And therewith they kissed and embraced, and so entered the house of love. Chapter 30. They have speech with Habundia concerning the Green Knight and his fellows. When the morrow was they arose and went their ways toward the wood, and Birdalone in her hunter's coat, quiver at back and bow in hand. They came to the oak of tryst, and Birdalone was at point to call on the woodwife by the burning of a hair of hers, when she came lightly from out the thicket, clad as Birdalone, and her very image. She stood before them with a glad countenance, and said, Welcome to the seekers and finders. But Arthur stepped forth and knelt before her, and took her right hand and kissed it, and said, Here I swear allegiance to thee, O Lady of the Woods, to do thy will in all things, and give thee thanks from my heart more than my tongue can say. Quoth the woodwife, I take thine allegiance, fair young man, and mine help shalt thou have henceforward. Then she smiled and her eyes danced for merriment, and she said, Yet thy thanks meseemeth for this while are more due to the wise carline who brought thee through the woods 2 days ago, and only left thee when the way was easy and clear to thee. Lady, said Arthur, I know now how great is thy might, and that thou canst take more shapes than this only, and humbly I thank thee that for us thou hast taken the shape that I love the best of all on the earth. Said the woodwife, Stand up, black squire, and consider a little what thou wouldst have me do for thee, while I have speech with mine image yonder. And therewith she came up to Birdalone, and drew her a little apart, and fell to stroking her cheeks and patting her hands and diversely caressing her, and she said to her, How now, my child, have I done for thee what I promised? And art thou wholly happy now? Oh yea, said Birdalone, if naught else befell us in this life but to dwell together betwixt the woodland and the water, and to see thee oft, full happy should we be. Nevertheless, said Habundia, art thou not come hither to ask somewhat of me, that ye may be happier? So it is, wise mother, said Birdalone, grudge not against me therefore, for more than one thing drives me thereto. I will not grudge, said the woodwife, but now I will ask thy mate if he has thought what it is that he will have of me. And she turned to Arthur, who came forth and said, Lady, I have heard thee, and herein would we have thee help us. There were erst 6 fellows of us, 3 carries and 3 queens, to whom was added this sweetling here. But one of them, to wit the Golden Knight, was slain, and for the rest. Yea, I know, said the woodwife, my child here hath told me all, and now ye wot not where they are or if they be yet alive, all or any of them. Now is it not so that ye would seek these friends, if it were but to greet them but once, and that ye would ask of the wise woodwife help to find them? Is there any more of the tale? Nay, lady, said Arthur. Said she, Well then, that help shall ye have, were it but for the sake of that little Viridis whereof my child hath told me. Wherefore abide tidings of me for 14 days, and seek not to me ere then. And meantime fear not, nor doubt me, for many messengers I have, and ever may I do somewhat if the end of the tale is to be told in these woodlands, and I deem these friends will not be hard to draw hither. For it is most like that they be thinking of you and longing for you, as ye for them. And now I will depart on my business, which is yours, and do ye be happy today in the woodland, and tomorrow in the meadows and by the water, and let no trouble weigh down your happy days. Therewith she flitted away from them, when she had kissed them both. But when she was gone they fared away together deep into the wood, and were exceeding merry disporting them, and on their return they gat them venison for their meat, and so came back to the house of love when the moon was up and shining brightly. Chapter 31. Habundia cometh with tidings of those dear friends. Wore the days thenceforth merrily. And one day it was delight in the wide meads, and another they went a long way west along the water side, and so into another meadow plain, smaller than their home plain, which Birdalone had never erst come into. And 3 eyots lay off it, green and tree beset, whereto they swam out together. Then they went into the wood thereby in the heat of the afternoon, and so wore the day, that they deemed themselves belated, and lay there under a thorn bush the night through. Another day Birdalone took her mate over on to Green Eyot and Rock Eyot, and showed him all the places she was used to haunt. And they had their fishing gear with them, and angled off the eyots a good part of the day, and had good catch, and swam back therewith merrily. And Birdalone laughed, and said that it seemed to her as if once again she were ransoming her skin of the witch-wife by that noble catch. Divers times also they fared into the wood, and thrice they lay out the night there in some woodlawn where was water, and on one of these times it happed that Arthur awoke in the grey dawn, and lay open-eyed but not moving for a little. And therewith he deemed he saw the gleam of war-gear in the thicket. So he kept as still as he might, but gat his sword out of its sheath without noise, and then leapt up suddenly, and sprang thitherward whereas he had seen that token, and again saw armour gleam and heard some man crashing through the underwood. For all was gone in one moment. So he woke up Birdalone, and they bended their bows both of them, and searched the thicket thereabouts heedfully, arrow on string, but found not fiercer than a great sow and her farrow. So came the full day, and they gat them back to their meadows and their house, but thereafter were they warier in going about the woodland. In all joyance then wore the days till the 15th, and in the morning early they went their ways to the oak of tryst, and had no need to call Habundia to them, for presently she came forth out of the thicket, with her gown gathered up into her girdle and bow in hand. But she cast it down and ran up to Birdalone, and kissed her and clipped her, and then she took a hand of Arthur and a hand of Birdalone, and held them both and said, My child, and thou dear knight, have ye still a longing to fall in with those friends of yours, and to run all risk of whatsoever contention and strife there may be betwixt you thereafter? Yea, certes, said Arthur, and even so said Birdalone. Well is that then, said the woodwife, but now and for this time, ere I help you, I shall put a price upon my help, and this is the price, that ye swear to me never wholly to sunder from me. That once in the year at least, as long as ye be alive and wayworthy, ye come into the forest of Evilshaw, and summon me by the burning of a hair of mine, that we may meet and be merry for a while, and part with the hope of meeting once more at least. And if ye will not pay the price, go in peace, and ye shall yet have my help in all other matters that may seem good unto you, but not in this of joining your fellowship together. How sayest thou, Birdalone, my child? How sayest thou, black squire, whom, as meseemeth, I have delivered from a fate worse than death, and have brought out of wretchedness into bliss? Spake Birdalone, had I dared, I would have bidden thee to swear to me even such an oath, to wit, that thou wouldst never wholly sunder thee from me. How then may I not swear this that thou biddest me, and that with all joy and trustiness? Spake Arthur, Lady, had I no will to swear oath for thy sake, yet with a good will would I swear it for my true love's sake who loveth thee. Yet verily of mine own will would I swear it joyfully, were it for naught else save to pleasure thee, who hast done so kindly by me, and hath given me back my manhood and my love, which else I had miserably lost. Spake the woodwife, It is well again. Join hands then, and swear as I have bidden you by the love ye bear each other. Even so they did, and then the woodwife kissed them both and said, Now do I deem you earth's very children and mine, and this desire of yours is good, and it shall be done if I may bring it about. Yet therein the valiance and wisdom of you both may well be tried. For this have I found out by my messengers and others, that your friends are alive, all of them. And they have thought of you in their inmost hearts, and have long determined that they must needs go seek you if they are to live lives happy and worthy. Furthermore, their quest hath drawn them hither to Evilshaw, nor say I that I have been nothing therein, and they are even now in the wood. But ye shall know that peril encompasses them. For they fare but a few, and of those few be there 2 traders who are minded to deliver them to the men of the Red Company, unto whom 3 women as fair as your she-friends were a prize indeed. Wherefore the red folk are dogging them, and will fall upon them when they find the occasion. But I shall see to it that the occasion shall be in time and place where they shall not be unholpen. Now what ye have to do for your parts, is to waylay the waylayers, and keep watch and ward anigh the road they must needs take, and to fall on when need is. But this again I shall see to, that your onset fail not. But now ye may say, Since thou art mighty, why shouldst not thou thyself take our friends out of the hands of these accursed, as thou couldst well do, and we to take no part therein? My friends, this might indeed well be. But thou, Birdalone, hast told me the whole tale, and how that there be wrongs to be forgiven which cannot be made right, and past kindness to be quickened again, and coldness to be kindled into love, and estrangement into familiar friendship. And meseems that the sight of your bodies and your hands made manifest to the eyes of them may do somewhat herein. Yet if otherwise ye think, then so let it be, and go ye back to the house under the wood, and in 3 days' time I will bring you your friends all safe and sound. Now they both said that they would not for aught that they should have no hand in the deliverance of them, so the woodwife said, Come with me, and I shall lead you to the place of your ambush. Then all they went on together, and fared a long way west, and toward the place where erst they two had found Arthur. And at last, 2 hours before sunset, they came to where was a glade or way between the thickets, which was as it were a little beaten by the goings of manfolk. And the woodwife did them to wit, that the evil folk aforesaid had so used it and beaten it, that it might just look as if folk were wont to pass that way, whereas it was not very far from their chiefest haunt and stronghold. A little on the north side of this half-blind way, and some 10 yards through the thicket, the ground fell away into a little dale, the bottom whereof was plain and well grassed, and watered by a brook. Thither the woodwife brought the twain. And when they all stood together on the brook side, she said to them, Dear friends, this is your woodland house for this time, and I rede you go not forth of it, lest ye happen upon any of those evil men. For naught have ye to fear from any save them. Here amidst these big stones, which make, see ye, as it were a cavern, have I stowed victual for you. And armour therewithal, because, though both of you are in a manner armed, yet who knoweth where a shaft drawn at a venture may reach. And from the said stones she drew forth 2 very fair armours, helm and hauberk, and leg and arm wards. And they were all of green, and shone but little, but were fashioned as no smith of manfolk could have done the like. This is thine, Sir Arthur, said the woodwife, and thou wilt wear it like as it were silk. And this thine, my child, and thou art strong enough to bear such light gear. And I charge you both to do on this gear presently, nor do it off till ye have achieved the adventure. And now this is the last word, here is a horn of Oliphant which thou shalt wear about thy neck, Birdalone, and if thou be sore bestead, or thy heart faileth thee, blow in it, yet not before the onfall. And then, whether thou blow much or little, thou shalt be well holpen. Now be not downcast if not befall tonight or tomorrow, or even the day after. But if the 3rd day be tidingless, then at sunset burn a hair of my head, Birdalone, and I will come to you. And now farewell. For I have yet to do in this matter. With that she kissed Birdalone fondly and embraced Arthur, and went her way. And those twain abode in the dale, and slept and watched by turns, and all was tidingless till the morrow's dawn, neither was there aught to tell of on that day and the night that ended it. Chapter 32. Of the fight in the forest and the rescue of those friends. Of the fight in the forest and the rescue of those friends from the men of the Red Company. Light was growing on the dawn of the next day, and the colours of things could be seen. When Birdalone, who was holding this last watch of the night, stood still and hearkened, deeming that she could hear some noise that was neither the morning wind in the tree boughs nor the going of the wild things anear them in the wood. So she did off her helm to hear the better, and stood thus a little, then she turned about and stooped down to Arthur, who was yet sleeping, and put forth a hand to rouse him. But or ever she touched him, broke forth a sound of big and rough voices and laughter, and amidst it 2 shrieks as of women. Arthur heard it, and was on his feet in a moment, and helmed, and he caught up his bended bow and cast on the quiver, for Birdalone was already weaponed. And without more words they went forth swiftly up the bank and through the thicket till they were looking on the half-blind way, but under cover, and there was nothing before them as yet. There they stayed and hearkened keenly. There were no more shrieks of women, nor heard they any weapon clash, but the talking and laughter of men went on, and at last they heard a huge and grim whoop of many men together. And then thereafter was less sound of talking, but came the jingle as of arms and harness, and Arthur whispered in Birdalone's ear, Stand close. They have gotten to horse, and will be coming our way. Knock an arrow. And even so did he. Therewith they heard clearly the riding of men, and in less than 5 minutes' space they saw 3 big weaponed men riding together, clad in red surcoats, and they were so nigh that they heard the words of their speech. One said to the other, How long shall the night hold out, think ye? Oh, a week maybe, said the other. Meseems it was scathed that we stayed not a while to pine him, said the first man. Nay, said the second, we be over heavy laden with bedgear to tarry. And they all laughed thereat, and so went on out of hearing. But then came four on together, whereof one, a gaunt, oldish man, was saying, It is not so much how long we shall be getting there, but what shall betide when we get there. For this is not like lifting a herd of neat, whereof sharing is easy, but with this naked-skinned, two-legged cattle, which forsooth ye can eat and yet have, there may well be strife over the sharing. And look to it if it hath not begun already, we must needs dismount 3 of our best men that these white-skinned bitches forsooth may each have a horse to herself. Or else would they be fighting as to which should have a damsel of them before him on the saddle, curse the fools. Laughed out they who were about him, and one young man cast a jeer at him the meaning whereof they might not catch, and again they laughed, and that deal passed on. And next came a bigger rout, a half-score or so, and they also laughing and jeering. But amidst them, plain to see riding astraddle, their ankles twisted together under the horses' bellies, their hands bound behind them, first Atra, black-clad as erst, then Aurea, in a gown of wheat colour, then Viridis, green-clad. Atra rode upright, and looking straight before her, Aurea hung her head all she might, and her long red hair fell about her face, but Viridis had swooned, and was held up in the saddle by one of the caitiffs on each side of her. They were but little disarrayed, save that some felon had torn the bosom of Viridis' gown, and dragged down the cloth so that her left shoulder was bare. Arthur looked, and drew at the caitiff who went afoot beside Atra, and Birdalone at him who went by Viridis, for she wot whitherward Arthur's shaft would be turned. The loose of the 2 bows made but one sound. Both men fell stark dead, and the others huddled together a moment, and then ran toward the thicket on either hand, and they who ran north, 2 of them saw not Arthur, because of his green armour, ere they felt the death which lay in his sword. And then he brake out amidst them, and there were 3 of them on him, yet for no long while, whereas their weapons bit not on the armour of the fairy. And his woodland blade sheared leather and ring mail to the flesh and the bone, mighty were his strokes, and presently all 3 were wallowing on the earth. Even therewith the 7 who had passed on had turned back and were come on him a horseback, and hard had it gone with him, despite of his might and his valour and the trustiness of Habundia's mail. But meanwhile Birdalone had run to Viridis, who had fallen a dead weight aside of her horse, and lay half hanging by the bonds of her ankles. Birdalone swiftly cut the cords both of her feet and her hands, and drew her off her horse as best she might, and laid her down on the grass, and then ran to Arthur's sword aloft, just as his new battle was at point to begin. But as she ran it came into her mind in a twinkling that her sword would be but weak, and the horn hung about her neck. Then she stayed her feet, and set the horn to her lips and blew. And the olifant gave forth a long singing note which was strange to hear. But while it was yet at her lips one of the caitiffs was upon her, and he cried out, Ha the witch, the accursed green witch! And fetched her a great stroke from his saddle, and smote her on the helm, and though his sword bit not on that good headberg, she fell to the ground unwitting. Yet was not the woodwife's promise unavailing, for even while the voice of the horn was in the air, the way and thickets were alive with men at arms, green-clad as those Twain, who straightway fell on the caitiffs, and with Arthur to help. Left not one of them alive. Then went some to Viridis, and raised her up, and so dealt with her that she came to herself again, and the like they did by Birdalone, and she stood, and looked about confusedly, but yet saw this, that they had gotten the victory. Some went withal to Aurea, and cut her bonds and took her off her horse and set her on the ground, and she was all bewildered, and knew not where she was. But Arthur, when he saw Birdalone on her feet, and unhurt by seeming, went to Atra, and cut her bonds and loosed her, and set her on the earth, all without a word, and then stood before her shyly. Came the colour back into her face therewith, and she flushed red, for she knew him despite his outlandish green war harness, and she reached out her hand to him, and he knelt before her and took her hand and kissed it. But she bent over him till her face was anigh his, and he lifted up his face and kissed her mouth. And she drew aback a little, but yet looked on him earnestly, and said, Thou hast saved my life, not from death indeed, but from a loathsome hell. I may well thank thee for that. And oh, if my thanks might be fruitful to thee. And her bosom heaved, and the sobs came, and the tears began to run down her cheeks. And he hung his head before her. But in a while she left weeping, and turned about her face and looked round the field of deed, and she said, Who is yonder slim green warrior who hath even now knelt down by Viridis? Is it not a woman? Arthur reddened. Yea, said he. It is Birdalone. Thy love? She said. He said swiftly, Yea, and thy friend, and this time thy deliverer. So it is, she said. It is 5 years since I beheld her. My heart yearns for her, I shall rejoice at the meeting of us. She was silent, and he also a while, then she said, But why tarry we here in idle talk when he is yet bound, and in torment of body and soul, he the valiant, and the kind and the dear brother? Come, tarry for no question. And she stepped out swiftly along the green road going westward, and Arthur beside her, and as they went by Viridis, lo! Aurea had wandered unto them, and now was Birdalone unhelmed and kissing and comforting her. Then cried out Atra, Keep up thine heart, Viridis. For now we go to fetch thee thy man safe and sound. So they went but a little way on the green road ere they came to Sir Hugh bound hard and fast to a tree bole, and he naked in his shirt, and hard by lay the bodies of 2 stout carles with their throats cut. For these honest men and the 2 felons who had betrayed them were all the following wherewith the Green Knight had entered Evilshaw. And as it fell, the traitors had been set to watch while the others slept. And sleeping the caitiffs found them, and slew the said men-at-arms at once, but bound Hugh to a tree that he might be the longer dying, since none looked for any but their own folk to pass by that way. All this they heard afterwards of Hugh. But now the said Hugh heard men going, and he opened his eyes, and saw Atra and a man-at-arms with her, and he cried out, Ha, what is this now, sister? A rescue? Yea, she said, and look thou on the face of the rescuer. And there is another hard by, and she is a woman. Therewith was Arthur on him and cutting his bonds, and when he was loose they fell into each other's arms, and Hugh spake, Now then at last doth life begin for me as I willed it. And hast thou my sweet she-fellow, Birdalone, with thee? Yea, said Arthur. How good is that? Said Hugh. And yet, if it might but be that Bodwen were yet alive for us to seek. Then he laughed and said, These be but sorry garments wherewith to wend along with dear and fair ladies, brother. Nay, said Arthur, that may soon be amended, for yonder, where sword met sword, lieth raiment abundantly on the grass. Fie on it. Said Hugh, laughing, Shall I do on me the raiment of those lousy traitors? Not I, by the rood. Thou must seek further for my array, dear lad. So they all laughed, and were glad to laugh together. But Atra said, It is easier even than that, for thine own fair garments and weapons shall we find if we seek them. Sooth to say there was none left to bear them off, save it were this man, or Birdalone his mate. With that word she looked kindly on Arthur, and again they laughed all 3, though forsooth they were well nigh weeping ripe, one for joy, and that was Hugh, one for memory of the days gone by. And one for the bitterness of love that should never be rewarded, albeit dear even unto her was the meeting of friends and the glory of forgiveness and the end of enmity. Chapter 33. Viridis telleth the tale of their seeking. Now came they back to where were the 3 others, and Viridis was quite come to herself and ran to meet her man, and he took her in his arms and caressed her sweetly. And then he turned to Birdalone, and spared no sign of friendly love to her, and Arthur, for his part, did so much for Aurea and Viridis. No long tale there was between them for that while, for they would busk them to be gone. But first they dug a grave for those 2 poor men who had been slain by the felons, and prayed for them. As for the caitiffs who lay slain there, 102 of them, they left them for the wolves to devour, and the tearing of the kites and crows, nor meddled they with any of their gear or weapons. But they speedily found Hugh's raiment, and his pouch, wherein was money good store, and they found also rings and ouches and girdles, which had been torn from the damsels in the first rage of their taking. First though, When they had gathered together such horses as they needed, and let the rest run wild, Birdalone brought her she-friends down into the dale, and did them to bathe in a pool of the stream. And tended them as if she were their tire-woman, so that they were mightily refreshed. And she made garlands for them of the woodland flowers, as eglantine and honeysuckle, and herself, she bathed her, and did not on her battle gear again, but clad her body in her woman's array. Then she brought forth victual and wine from Habundia's store, and set it out on the stream side. And thereafter she went up the bent to the green way and fetched down Hugh and Arthur, and brought them to the ladies, and bade them note how trim and lovely they were gotten again. And again it could scarce be but that kisses and caresses were toward. And in all content and love they took their breakfast, though bittersweet unto Atra had been the holding of her hand by Arthur and the kissing of her cheek, albeit not for worlds had she foregone it. So there they abode merrily for some 3 hours, whereas the day was yet young, and they asked and told each other much, so that the whole tale, both of the seekers from the world and of the seekers from the waterside, came out little by little. Now of the last ye have heard what there is to tell, but for the others Viridis took up the tale, as erst she did with the dealings of the knights of the quest in the Isle of Increase unsought. And it seemed by her tale that Hugh and the ladies, though they were living happily and prosperously in the land of the Green Mountains, wherein Hugh had wealth enow, yet the thought both of Arthur and of Birdalone would not out of their minds. And often it was that they thought of them, not as friends think of friends of whom they are content to know that they are yet alive and most like thriving, but as friends think of friends whose absence cuts a shard out of their lives. So that they long to see them day by day. Wherefore it came to this at last, after much talk hereof, that Hugh left his possessions and his children, for he had 2 women bairns born of Viridis, in the keeping of trusty folk, and took with him Viridis his wife, and Aurea and Atra. And they set out to seek those twain the world over till they should find them. And first by the rede of Atra they fared to Greenford, and there tarried a month, and sought tidings of many, and heard a word here and there whereby they deemed that Birdalone had passed there through some little time before. So they went thence to the castle of the quest, and found it in such plight as ye have heard, and it went sore to their hearts to behold it and to be there. But therewithal they happed upon Leonard the priest, and he was rejoiced beyond measure to see them, and told them all that ye have heard concerning Birdalone's coming thither and departing thence. And he told them therewith about those hauntings and sendings in the hall of the castle, and that they came to an end the very day that Birdalone departed thence in the sending boat. Yet for the last 3 days there had been visions therein. But being questioned he was loath to tell thereof, so they forbore him a while. At these tidings they were sore moved, and they talked the matter over betwixt themselves, and Leonard also was in their redes, and they must needs deem that either Birdalone was cast away, or that she had come to her old dwelling. The house under the wood, and belike had fallen into the hands of the witch once more, and thereat were they sore downcast. And yet somewhat it was, that they had heard sure tidings of her, though meanwhile of Arthur had they heard not. While they talked this over, Atra, who had been somewhat silent, spake and said, Here are we brought to a stop with the first tidings which we have heard, whereas we know no manner of wending the great water. This seemeth evil, but let us not be cast down, or die redeless. Ye have heard of what saith Sir Leonard of these hauntings in the hall, and how that they have come back again, wherefore why should we not sleep in the hall this night, those of us at least who have not so much fear as not to note them well? To see if we may draw any avail from them. How say ye? For my part one will try the adventure, whatever may come of it. Now they all said it, though Aurea was somewhat timorous, albeit she would not be parted from the others, so when night came there they made their beds and lay down. And the end of it was, that a little before midnight Atra waked the others, and did them to wit that by her deeming something was toward, and presently they were all 4 as wide awake as ever they were in their lives. And next, without any sound that was strange, there came the image of a woman on to the dais, clad in green like to an huntress of ancient days, her feet sandalled, her skirts gathered up into her girdle, so that her legs were naked. She had a quiver at her back, and a great bow in her hand. Now to all of them save Atra this appearance seemed to be the image of Birdalone. But she told her fellows afterwards, that to her it seemed not to be altogether Birdalone, but rather some other one most like unto her, as it were her twin sister. Gazed the image kindly and sweetly on them, so that they beheld it without fear. And it seemed to them that it gave forth speech, yet not so much that the sound of words was in the air about and smote their ears, as that the sense of words reached the minds of them. And this was the tale of it: Ye, who are seeking the lost, have done well to come hither, and now shall ye do well to wend the straightest way to the dwelling of the wildwood, and that is by way of the western verge of Evilshaw the forest. Greenford is on the way. Wayleaders ye shall get, be wise, yet not prudent, and take them, though they be evil, and your luck may well avail. Therewith the image vanished away as it had come, and Leonard, who with the others took the appearance for an image of Birdalone, said that it was such as he had seen it the 3 last days. So they lay not down again, but departed for Greenford without tarrying, and rode the other end of the short night through till they came to Greenford. But Leonard would not with them. And Hugh behind him, if he lived and did well, to come back somehow to the castle of the quest, and so redo it that it should be no longer desolate. So to Greenford they came, and spared not to do folk to wit that they would ride a pilgrimage in Evilshaw, and were fain of wayleaders. And there they dwelt a day or 2, and many would let them of that journey, which, said they, was rather deadly than perilous only. But on the 3rd day came to Sir Hugh 2 stout carles well weaponed, who said that they knew well all the ways that led to Evilshaw, and the ways that went there through, and they offered themselves for a wage to Sir Hugh. Now these said carles were not over fair of favour, but seemed somewhat of ribalds, nor would Sir Hugh have taken them to service in his house at home. But he called to mind that it were more prudence than wisdom to spoil his journey and lose the occasion of finding his dear friends for the hasty judgment of a man's face and demeanour, wherefore he waged these 2 men. And they set out for the western edges of Evilshaw. Many towns and thorps they passed through, and everywhere, when men knew whither they were bound, they let them all they might in words. But little heed they paid thereto, whereas they were all fixed in their rede that naught was to be done save the finding of their friends, and that their life days were spoiled if they found them not. And moreover, each one of them, but especially Atra and Viridis, had dreams of the night from time to time, wherein they seemed to see the green-clad woman, were she Birdalone or another, beckoning and bidding them to enter the wood of Evilshaw. As to those 2 wayleaders withal, whether it were that they got used to their faces, or that their ways and manners were not uncourteous or fierce, they doubted them less and less as time wore. All save Viridis, whose flesh crept when they drew anigh her, as will betide one who comes across an evil-looking creeping thing. As for Atra, she now began to heed little the things about her, as if her heart were wholly set on the end of the journey. But now at last were they come so far that they had no choice but to use the said wayleaders, for they were gotten to the edge of Evilshaw. So they entered it, and those 2 led them by half-blind ways and paths amongst the thickets, and fumbled never with the road. 5 days they went thus, and on the 5th evening they lay down to sleep in the wood, and it was the turn of those 2 hirelings to keep watch and ward, and they woke not the next morn save with the hands of the red felons at their throats. So that Hugh was bound, and his 2 trusty men who came with him from the Green Mountains were slain before a stroke might be struck. This was the end of Viridis' tale, save that she told how that it was she that had uttered those 2 shrieks which Arthur and Birdalone had heard from the thicket. And that she had so done when the 2 false wayleaders laid hold of her to drag her away from her man, who stood there before her bound to a tree that he might perish there. Whereon the 2 caitiffs had smitten her into unwit that they might have no more of her cries. Now when all this had been told, and they had abided a while in the fair little dale, and had said many kind endearing words of friendship, they went up on the green way again. And took what of the horses they needed and trussed their goods thereon, and Birdalone would not leave that brave armour which Habundia had given her, and they dight others for their home riding, and the rest they turned loose into the woods. And so rode their ways, Birdalone going ever with Atra, and Arthur by Aurea. But Viridis must needs have Hugh within reach of her hand all the way. Good speed they made, so that ere the night had fallen on them, though the sun was set, they had come to the house under the wood. And there again was joy and wondering of the newcomers, and merry feasting on such simple victuals as were there, and good night and rest in all contentment in the house where erst had Birdalone told so many griefs and fears. Here ends the 6th part of the Water of the Wondrous Isles, which is called the Days of Absence, and begins the 7th part, which is called the Days of Returning. The 7th part, the Days of Returning. Chapter 1. Sir Hugh asketh Birdalone where she would have the abode. Sir Hugh asketh Birdalone where she would have the abode of their fellowship to be. On the next day, they arose and were glad. And it was to them as if the sun of the early summer had arisen for naught save to shine on their happy day. And they went about from place to place whereas tidings had befallen Birdalone, and she served them one and all as if she were their handmaid, and they loved her and caressed her, and had been fain to do all her will did they but know it. In this wise wore day after day till June began to wane, and then on a time came Hugh unto Birdalone, and spake unto her and said, All we have been talking together. And I am sent to ask thee what is in thy mind as to abiding here or going elsewhither. For now that we be come together again, not for all the kingdoms of the world would we sunder again, and above all, none of us would leave thee, O my sister. But if thou wilt come with me to our land under the green mountains, there is for thee a pleasant place and a fair dwelling, and honour from all folk, and our love that shall never leave thee. And I, and Arthur my brother, we shall win fame together amongst the knighthood, and thou shalt be proud and glad both of him and of me. She said, And if I may not go with thee thither, what other way is there to escape the sundering? Said Hugh, This, that thou choose in the world what land liketh thee for a dwelling place, and we will go with thee and leave thee never, and thou shalt be our lady and queen. Then he laughed and said, Yet, our lady, I have left behind me under the green mountains certain things which I love, as 2 fair women children, and a squire or 2 whose fathers served my fathers. And whose children I would should serve my children. And moreover I have left there certain matters of avail, my wealth and livelihood to wit. Wilt thou begrudge it if I must needs go fetch these, and bring them to the land where thou dwellest, through whatever peril we may have to face? Dear art thou, she said, and my very friend, but tell me, how sorry wouldst thou be to leave thine own land and follow after me for the sake of one who is neither thine own true love nor of thy kindred? Said he, Not so sorry that I should grudge against thee thereafter. Moreover if that much of sorrow came to me, I should deem it not ill, lest I grow so over-happy that the luck rise up against me and undo me. She said, smiling on him kindly, Meseems that I am over-happy, whereas I have such dear cherishing of noble friends. But now I will tell thee all, and maybe thou wilt love me the less for the telling. In these woods here, and lady and mistress of them, dwelleth one who is not of the race of Adam. And she helped and cherished me and gave me wisdom when I was tormented and accursed, and she it was who saved me from the evil witch, and gave me the good hap to meet your loves and to fetch you to their helping. And twice hath she saved me from mortal peril otherwise. And she hath found me my love, thy brother Arthur, and delivered him from unwit and wanhope. And she it is who drew all you hither unto us, and who delivered you from the felons who had mastered you. And I have sworn unto her that I would never wholly sunder me from her. And how shall I break mine oath and grieve her, even had I the will thereto, as God would I have not? And she wept therewith. But Hugh kissed her and said, Birdalone, my dear, why weepest thou? Didst thou not hear my word, that thy people should be my people, and thy land my land, and that whither thou goest I will go? Dost thou not trow me then? Or how deemest thou I may tear thy friend Viridis from thee, when she hath just found thee? But tell me, hast thou in thy mind any dwelling place other than this? Yea, she said, I may not depart very far from this forest of Evilshaw lest I grieve my wisdom mother overmuch. But if one go westward through the wood, he shall happen at last, when he cometh forth of it, on a good town hight Utterhay, which lieth on the very edge thereof. There was I born, and there also I looked to find 3 dear and trusty friends to whom I owe return of their much kindness. It is a noble town in a pleasant land, and thou and my lord Arthur may well win both honour and worship and lordship there. And wholly I trust in thy word that thou wilt not grudge against me for dragging thee thither. Therewith she gave him her hand, smiling on him, though there was yet trouble in her face. But he took the hand and held it, and laughed merrily and said, Lo now! How good it is for friends to take counsel together! What better may we do than go with thee thither? And how greatly will Viridis rejoice when she heareth of this! Now will I go and tell her and the others. Go then, dear lad, she said, but as to the matter of thy fetching thy children and livelihood hither, that may be not so hard nor so perilous as thou deemest. And thou shalt go about it whenso thou wilt, and the sooner the better, and we shall abide thee here as long as need may be. And therewith he went his ways to tell Viridis and the others of this rede which they had come to between them. Chapter 2. Birdalone taketh counsel with her wood mother concerning the matter of Sir Hugh. On that same day went Birdalone to the oak of tryst and called her wood mother to her, and she came glad and smiling, and kissed and embraced Birdalone. And said unto her, Now I see that thou art well content with this last matter I have done for thee, whereas thou art come to crave a new gift of me. How knowest thou that? Said Birdalone, laughing. Said Habundia. Wouldst thou have come to me so soon otherwise from out of all that happiness? I have come to tell thee of my rede, said Birdalone, and to ask thee if thou art like-minded with me thereon. Said the woodwife, And what is thy rede, my child? Wood mother, said Birdalone, we deem that it were good for us all to go down into Utterhay where I was born, and to take up our abode therein. Said the woodwife, This rede I praise, and even so would I have counselled you to do. But I abided to see if it should come from out of thy breast, and now even so it hath done, wherefore I understand thy wisdom and rejoice in thee. And now crave thy boon, my child, and thou shalt have it without fail. Yea, said Birdalone, that will I, and the more that it is a simple one and easy for thee to do. Thou knowest that Hugh the Green Knight hath come with my she-friends seeking us all the way from under the Green Mountains, and he hath left there goods that he needs must have and folk whom he loves. And now he would go back thither, and fetch all that away hither, and see to his matters as soon as may be. And I would have thee counsel us what to do, whether to build a bark, as perchance we may get it done, and sail the lake therein to the castle of the quest or thereabout, and thence to ride to his land. Or else to take thy guidance and safe conduct through the wood, and to bring his folk back the same way. Said the woodwife, As to the way by water, I may help you little therein, and meseemeth that way be many traps and wiles and many perils. Wherefore I bid you try it not, but let the Green Knight come up hither to this tree tomorrow before noon, all horsed and armed and arrayed, and there shall he find 3 men armed in green gear, horsed well, and leading 2 sumpter beasts with them. And they shall be his until he giveth them back unto me. But if he doubteth anything betwixt the wood's end and under the Green Mountains, let him wage what folk he will besides, for these my men will have money enough of his with them. But by no means let him send them away till he hath done with the wood altogether, both betwixt here and the western dwelt land, and here and Utterhay, save thou be with him. But while these be with him, both he and whatsoever money he bringeth shall be sure from all peril whiles they be in the wood. Now, my child, was not this the boon thou camest up hither to ask of me? Yea verily, said Birdalone. Yet also I came up hither to praise thee and thank thee and love thee. And she threw herself into Habundia's arms and kissed and caressed her, and Habundia her in like wise. Spake the woodwife, Thou art the beloved child of my wisdom. And now I see of thee that thou wilt be faithful and true and loving unto me unto the end. And I think I can see that thou and thy man shall do well and happily in Utterhay, and the Green Knight also and thy she-friends. And whatsoever thou wilt of me that I may do for thee or thy friends, ask it freely, and freely shalt thou have it. But this I will bid thee, that the while the Green Knight shall be gone about his matter, thou shalt come hither to me often. And thy friends also thou shalt bring to me, that I may see them and talk to them and love them. And specially shalt thou bid Atra unto me. For meseems she is so wise already that I may learn her more wisdom, and put that into her heart which may solace her and make her to cease from fretting her own heart, and from grief and longing overmuch. And I were fain to reward her in that she hath forborne to grudge against thee and to bear thee enmity. For I know, my child, not from mine own heart, but from the wisdom I have learned, how hardly the children of Adam may bear to have that which they love taken away from them by another. Even if they themselves might in the long last have wearied of it and cast it away their own selves. Go now, my child, and do thy friend to wit what I will do for him. Therewith they parted, and Birdalone fared home to the house, and found the fellowship of them all sitting by the brookside, and talking sweetly together in all joy and hope of what their life should be in the new land whereto Birdalone would lead them. Straightway then she told them of Hugh and his journey, and how well he should be guarded in the wood both coming and going. And they thought that right good, and they thanked her and praised her, and took her into their talk, and she sat down by them happily. Chapter 3. Of the journeying through the forest of Evilshaw unto the town of Utterhay. On the morrow in due time Birdalone, going afoot, led Sir Hugh, all armed and horsed, to the oak of tryst, and there they found the 3 men at arms, well weaponed and in green weed, abiding them. They did obeisance to Sir Hugh, and he greeted them, and then without more ado he kissed Birdalone and went his ways with his way-leaders, but Birdalone turned back to the house and her friends. Next day Birdalone brought her 3 she-friends unto the trysting oak, and showed them to the wood-mother, and she was kind and soft with them. And both Aurea and Viridis were shy with her, and as if they feared her, but Atra was frank and free, and spake boldly. And thereafter when Birdalone went to meet her wood-mother, Atra would go with her if she were asked, and at last would go alone, when she found that Habundia was fain of her coming, so that there were not many days when they met not. And the woodwife fell to learning her the lore of the earth, as she had done aforetime with Birdalone, and Atra waxed ruddier and merrier of countenance, whereof was Birdalone right glad, and Arthur yet more glad, and the others well content. So wore the time till Hugh had been gone for 23 days, and as they walked the meadows anigh the house about Undern, they saw a knight riding down the bent toward them, and presently they knew him for Hugh. And turned and hastened to meet him, so that he was straightway amidst them, and on foot. Dear then were the greetings and caresses betwixt them, and when it was over, and Birdalone had led away his horse and dight it for him, and had gotten him victuals and drink, and they were all sitting on the grass together. He told them how he had fared. He had done all his matters in the land under the green mountains, and had given over his lands and houses to a man of his lineage, his cousin, a good knight, and had taken from him of gold and goods what he would. Then he had taken his 2 bairns and their nurse, and an old squire and 5 sergeants, whereof one was his foster brother, and the others men somewhat stricken in years, and had departed with them. Sit hence he had come his ways to Greenford, and had held talk therein with the prior of a great and fair house of black canons, and had given him no little wealth wherewith to redo the castle of the quest what was needed. And for livelihood of 4 canons to dwell there, and Leonard to be their prior, that there they might remember Sir Bodwin their dear friend daily in the office, and do good unto his soul. Sit hence he had ridden to the castle of the quest with the said prior of St. Austin of Greenford, and had found Leonard, and had settled all the business how it was to be done. Thereafter he had returned to Greenford, and gathered his folk, and got him gone, under the guidance of Habundia's folk, by castles and thorps and towns the nearest way to the edge of Evilshaw. And they had come to the forest, and ridden it 6 days without mishap, and when they had come to the oak of tryst once more, the way-leaders said that it were well if all they together tarried not much longer in the forest. Wherefore they had brought them to a fair wood lawn, and there they encamped, and were there as now. And, said Hugh, there are they abiding me, and it is in my mind that this very eve we go, all of us, and meet them there, if ye may truss your goods in that while, but as to victuals, we have plenty, and it needeth not. And then tomorrow shall we wend our way as straight as may be toward the good town of Utterhay. All they said it, though in her heart maybe Birdalone had been fain of abiding a little longer in her own land, but she spake no word thereof. And they all set to work to the trussing up of their goods, and then turned their backs on the great water, and came up into the woodland, and so to the camp in the woodlawn. And there had Viridis a joyful meeting with her babes, and she gladdened the hearts of Sir Hugh's men-at-arms by her kind greeting. And they rejoiced in meeting Aurea and Atra again, and they wondered at Birdalone and her beauty, and their hearts went out to her, both the old men's and the young ones. But Habundia's men looked on it all like images of warriors. There then they feasted merrily that evening. But when the morrow was come they were speedily on the way toward Utterhay. And the wayleaders guided them so well and wisely, that by noon of the 5th day they were come forth of the wood and on to the bent that looked down upon the town of Utterhay. There turned to Hugh the 3 wayleaders, and spake, Lord, we have done thee the service which we were bidden, if thou hast no further need of us, give us leave. Said Hugh, Leave ye have, and I shall give you a great reward ere ye go. Said the chief of them, Nay, Lord, no reward may we take, save a token from thee that thou art content with us. What token shall it be? Said Hugh. Quoth the wayleader, that each of us kiss the lady Birdalone on the mouth, for she it is that is verily our mistress under our great mistress. Laughed Hugh thereat, but the men laughed not. Then spake Hugh, This must be at the lady's own will. Even so, said they. Then Hugh brought Birdalone thither and told her what was toward, and she consented to the kiss with a good will, and said to each of the men after they had kissed her, Herewith goeth my love to the mistress and queen of the woods. Do ye bear the same unto her? And thereafter those wayleaders fared back into the woods. Now they gather themselves together and go down toward Utterhay, and make a brave show, what with the sumpter horses, and the goodly array of the 4 ladies, and the glittering war-gear of the men-at-arms. And Sir Hugh and Sir Arthur displayed their pennons as they went. All this saw the warders on the wall of Utterhay, and they told the captain of the port, and he came up onto the wall, and a man with him. And when he saw this bright company coming forth from the wood, he bade men to him, 20 of them, all weaponed, and he did on his armor, and rode out agates with them to meet those newcomers. And this he did, not because he did not see them to be but few, but because they came forth out of Evilshaw, and then doubted if they were trustworthy. So he met them 2 bowshots from the gate, and rode forward till he was close to the wayfarers. And when he beheld the loveliness of the women, and especially of Birdalone, who wore that day the gleaming glittering gown which Habundia had given her, he was abashed, and deemed yet more that he had to do with folk of the fairy. But he spake courteously, and said, turning to Hugh, who rode the foremost, Fair sir, would ye tell unto the man whose business it is to safeguard the good town of Utterhay what folk ye be, and on what errand ye ride? And how it is that ye come forth from Evilshaw safe, in good case, with pennons displayed, as if the said wood were your very own livelihood? For, sooth to say, hitherto we have found this, that all men dread Evilshaw, and none will enter it uncompelled. Thereto answered Hugh, I hight Sir Hugh the Green Knight, and am come from under the Green Mountain. And this is Sir Arthur, called the Black Squire, but a knight he is verily, and of great kindred and a warrior most doughty. And he hath been captain of the good town of Greenford west away through the wood yonder a long way, and hath done the town and the frank thereof mickle good service in scattering and destroying the evil companies of the Red Hold. Which hold we took by force of arms from the felons who held it for the torment and plague of the countryside. Now as to our errand, we be minded to dwell in your good town of Utterhay, and take our part with your folk, and we have wealth enow thereto, so as to be beholden to none. And as time goes on we may serve you in divers wise, and not least in this maybe, that with a good will we shall draw a sword for your peace and the freedom of them of Utterhay. When the captain heard these words, he made obeisance to Sir Hugh, and said, Fair sir, though we be here a long way from Greenford, yet have we heard some tale of the deeds of you, and surely the port and all the folk shall be fain of your coming. Yet I pray thee be not wrath. For there is a custom of the good town, that none may enter its gates coming from out of this forest of Evilshaw, save he leave some pledge or caution with me, be it his wealth, or the body of some friend or fellow, or, if not else, his very own body. Wherefore if thou, Sir Green Knight, wilt but give us some sure pledge, then will I turn about and ride with you back and through the gate into Utterhay. And doubtless, when the mayor hath seen you and spoken with you, the said pledge shall be rendered to you again. Ere Hugh might answer, came Birdalone forth and said, Sir Captain, if I, who am the lady of the Black Squire here, be hostage good enough, then take me, and if need be, chain me to make surer of me. And she drew near unto him smiling, and held out her hands as if for the manacles. But when the captain saw her thus, all the blood stirred in his body for joy of her beauty, and he might but just sit his horse for his wonder and longing. But he said, The saints forbid it, lady, that I should do thee any hurt or displeasure, or aught save the most worship I may. But thy hostage I will take, Sir Knight, if thou be content to yield her, whereas in an hour belike she shall be free again. And now fare we all gateward again. So then they all rode on together, Birdalone by the captain's left hand. And as they passed by the poor houses without the wall, she looked and saw the one which had been her mother's dwelling, so oft and so closely had she told her all about it. Thus then they entered Utterhay, and the captain led them straight to the moat house whereas the mayor and the port were sitting. And much people followed them through the streets, wondering at them, and praising the loveliness of the women, and the frank and gallant bearing of the men-at-arms. So they lighted down at the moat house and were brought to the mayor, and when he had spoken them but a little, and had come to himself again from the fear and abashment that he had of them, he showed himself full fain of their coming. And bade them welcome to the good town, and took them into his own house to guesting, until folk might dight a very goodly house which the port did give unto them. But some 2 hours afterwards, when they were housed in all content, as they sat in the hall of the mayor, which was great and goodly, talking and devising with worthies of Utterhay, there entered 2 fair and frank-looking young men, who went straight up to Birdalone, and the first knelt down before her and kissed her hand, and said, O our Lady, and art thou verily come to us? O, our happiness and the joy of this day! But when she saw him and heard him and felt the touch of his hand, she bent down to him and kissed him on the forehead, for she knew him that it was Robert Gerard's son. Then the other man came up to her as if he also would have knelt to her, but his purpose changed, and he cast his arms about her body and fell to kissing her face all over, weeping the while. And then he drew off and stood trembling before her, and she, all blushing like a red rose and laughing a little, and yet with the tears in her eyes, said, O Giles Gerard's son, and thou, Robert, how fain I am to see you twain. But tell me, is your father well? Yea, verily, our dear lady, said Robert, and it will be unto him as a fresh draught of youth when he wotteth that thou art come to dwell amongst us, for so it is, O lady beloved, is it not? Said he. Yea, forsooth, or even so I hope, said Birdalone. But here be other friends that ye must needs know, if we come to dwell together here in peace, and then go and fetch me hither your father. Therewith she presented them unto Arthur and Hugh and the 3 ladies of the quest, and all they greeted them kindly and in all honor, and the Gerard sons loved and worshipped them, and especially the lovely ladies, the she-friends of their lady. And whiles they were about this, in cometh old Gerard himself, and when Birdalone saw him at the door, she arose and ran to meet him, and cast her arms about him as if she were his own daughter, and most joyful was the meeting betwixt them. Chapter 4 Of the abiding in Utterhay in love and contentment. Now when 7 days were worn, the mayor made a great feast at his house, and thither were bidden all the men of the port and other worthies, and great merchants who had come into their town. And the said feast was given in honor of these newcomers, and that day they sat on the dais, and all the guests worshipped them and wondered at their beauty. And naught was spoken of for many days save the glory and hope that there was in this lovely folk. But the next day after the feast were they brought to their house in all triumph. And it was as fair as might be thought of, and there they dwelt a while in rest and peace, and great recourse there was there of Gerard and his sons. But ere the winter was over, were Hugh and Arthur and Gerard and his sons taken to the freedom of Utterhay, and thereafter spake the chief men of the port and the masters of the crafts unto the 2 knights by the mouth of the mayor. And he told them, what already they partly knew, that the good town had of late gotten many enemies, whereas it was wealthy and not very strong, and that now 2 such warriors having come amongst them, they were minded to strengthen themselves. If only they too would of their gentleness and meekness become their war-dukes to lead them against the foemen. But the 2 friends answered that it was well their will to dwell there neighborly, and do them all the help they might, and that they would not gainsay the worship they offered them nor the work that should go with it. With that answer were all men well content and more, and then the mayor said that the mind of the porter was to strengthen the walls and the gates, and to build a good and fair castle, meet for any earl. Joining on to the wall by the face that looked west, that is to say, on to Evilshaw. and that liked the war-dukes well. So when spring came it was set about, but it was 5 years a-doing, and before it was all finished the war-dukes entered into it, and dwelt there with their wives and their friends in all honour. And a little thereafter, whether they would or no, the men of Utterhay had to handle weapons and fare afield to meet the foe with the valiant men of the crafts, and what of waged men they might get. And well and valiantly were they led by their dukes, and they came to their above, and gained both wealth and honour thereby. And from that time forward began the increase of Utterhay under those 2 captains, who were unto them as in old time the consuls had been unto the Roman folk, save that they changed them not year by year as the Romans were wont. So wore the days, and all those friends dwelt together in harmony and joy, though the wearing of time wrought changes amongst them. For Robert Gerardson began in no long while to look on Aurea with eyes of love. And at last he came to Birdalone and craved her leave to woo the said lady, and she granted it with a good will, and was fain thereof, whereas she saw that Aurea sorely lacked a mate, and scarce might she have a better than was Robert. So in process of time they 2 were wedded and dwelt together happily. Forsooth Birdalone had been fainer yet might she have seen Giles Gerardson and Atret drawn together. But though they were dear friends and there was much converse betwixt them, this betid not, so far as we have heard. The old Gerard dwelt happily amongst them all for 15 years after they had come to Utterhay, and then fell asleep, a very old man. As to the wood of Evilshaw, it was not once a year only that Birdalone and Arthur sought thither and met the wood mother, but a half-score of times or more, might be, in the year's circle. And ever was she kind and loving with them, and they with her. But of all those fellows it was Atra that had longest dealings with the woodwife. For whiles would she leave Utterhay and her friends and fare lonesome up into Evilshaw, and find Habundia and abide with her in all kindness holden for a month or more. And ever a little before these departures betid would she fall moody and few-spoken, but she came back ever from the wood calm and kind and well-liking. Amidst all these comings and goings somewhat wore off the terror of Evilshaw. Yet never was it accounted other than a daring deed to enter it alone without fellowship, and most had liefer that some man of religion were of their company therein, or they would bear about them something holy or blessed to hold the evil things. Now when all this hath been said, we have no more to tell about this company of friends, the most of whom had once haunted the lands about the water of the Wondrous Isles, save that their love never sundered. And that they lived without shame and died without fear. So here is an end.